Hello friends, today we are going to check and if necessary top up every fluid on my 6th generation, that's 2012 to 2025 Mitsubishi Mirage. So we're going to start by popping the hood by pulling this lever right here. Now looking at the gap between the hood and the front bumper, we can see this latch that we need to push out of the way to allow us to lift the hood up. So using my left hand thumb right here, we're just going to push this latch out of the way and then lift up on the hood. Now with the hood resting on my right shoulder, we're going to use my left hand to pick up the hood prop and insert it in the hole on the hood. There is an arrow on the hood indicating that this is what the hole is for. First fluid we're going to top up together is the windshield washer fluid. The reservoir is right here by the passenger side headlight. See, it kind of sits on the frame rail. There are two hoses that go to this reservoir, one darker on the left and one translucent on the right. The darker hose right here goes behind the fender, then along the hinge and to the hood behind this sound and fire insulation. And you can see it goes to the spray nozzles on the other side for the windshield. The translucent hose right here, it goes through the firewall. Let me unlock the passenger door to show you. Goes through the firewall right there. Then it runs along through this door sill right here to the rear wiper. Fluid color does not matter. You do not need to match fluid colors. I will be filling it up with this grocery store selection brand washer fluid. I recommend always using washer fluid that's designed to not freeze. I personally just fill this all the way up, but as you'll see in a second here, this is not recommended by Mitsubishi. Take note of the big air pocket in the top of the reservoir is preventing us from filling it all the way up. Looking at the owner's manual, it recommends filling it up only to 5 centimeters below the upper surface of the reservoir. So that air pocket is in effect forcing us to do this, and that gives the fluid room to expand if it were to freeze. But this is a non-issue for me as I always use anti-freeze washer fluid. According to the owner's manual, the Mirage washer fluid reservoir has a capacity of 2.5 liters. Next, we're going to top up coolant, which is also sometimes called antifreeze. Here's the radiator cap, here's the coolant reserve tank. On top of the cap it says coolant. If I shine this flashlight into the coolant reserve tank, it'll be easier for us to see the level. You can see the line below the F is the full line. And near the bottom of the reserve tank there's an L with a line below, and that's the low line. I'm going to top this up so that the coolant is right at that full line. If you're wondering why the coolant level goes down over time with the reserve tank cap open, you can see there's a hole on the right side right here. Mitsubishi did something very intelligent here. On the outside you can see that hole is downward facing, so if the radiator cap were to fail or if this were to be overfilled, it would allow the fluid to shoot downward away from any human beings hovering over it. This also allows the fluid to evaporate. I'm using genuine Mitsubishi super long life coolant from a dealership. If you're using something else, you may need to add a combination of the coolant and distilled water as they don't all come pre-mixed. You can see our coolant reserve tank is now right up to that full line. Should only do this if the vehicle is cold, and this is not absolutely necessary unless your vehicle has a leak, but I'm going to show you how to open the radiator cap. Looking at the back of the radiator cap, you can see that it's bent and there's these two wing-like things, and those fit into these two cutouts right here, and then you push down and rotate, and that's what holds it in place. So you can see my radiator's full. Also, there's this flat surface that seals, and then the outer perimeter is open to that hose that goes to the coolant reserve tank. The radiator cap acts as a pressure regulator. When coolant pressure gets too high in the radiator, this spring compresses and allows fluid to flow into the coolant reserve tank. Conversely, when there's a vacuum in the radiator, such as when coolant cools, it allows it to suck fluid from that reserve tank. If you ever put the wrong fluid in the reserve tank or need to remove it for any reason, it can be removed without any tools. You just pull straight up. At the radiator, you can see there's this channel the coolant reserve tank fits in, and on it there's a bump near the bottom. And on the reserve tank there's also a bump near the bottom, and that interlocks the reserve tank into the radiator, preventing it from sliding out when the car hits vibrations or whatever. Here are the owner's manual instructions for how to check coolant level. Next, we're going to check and, if necessary, top up our oil level. So we're going to start by wiping the dipstick clean, then putting it back in, and here we can see the oil level is about 2/3 full, which is plenty to me. The lower hole represents the low level and the upper hole represents the high level. If you're having trouble reading the dipstick, such as after an oil change when the fluid is very runny, when you pull it out, you can press it against a piece of paper towel and you can read the level that way. If you need to add oil, the cap is right here. There is no viscosity printed on the cap because in different markets, this vehicle requires different oil viscosities. Here are the service manual instructions on how to check engine oil level. Notably, the amount of oil required to take the engine from the minimum level to the maximum level is approximately a ½ liter. According to the owner's manual, we should check the oil level before starting the engine. Seems like one of those fancy ways to find an excuse to avoid your warranty. Practice checking the continuously variable transmission fluid level is impossibly difficult to do, but I'm going to show you what it looks like anyway. So pull the dipstick out, wipe it clean, just like we did for the engine oil dipstick. Then I'll put it back in, I'll pull it out, we'll look at the level together. You can see it's well past the full line. The reason for this is because the factory service manual has a procedure that must be performed before checking the oil level. Here is the official procedure from the factory service manual on how to check the transmission fluid level. It requires starting the vehicle, reaching a certain fluid temperature, then shifting through the gears. Unfortunately, this isn't something that's easy to do on your own, as there's no way to view what the fluid temperature is from within the vehicle. It does not display on the multi-information display or anything like that. You need an external scan tool to view the fluid temperature. It's also very hard to read the fluid level off a dipstick with any precision. So most people just rely on putting the same amount of fluid back into the transmission that they take out whenever they do oil changes. But in theory, this fluid is also non-consumable. It should not burn or go down in level over time. If you do, for some reason, need to top up fluid, it's done by putting a funnel on the dipstick tube. Last but not least, we're going to check our brake fluid level. The reservoir is right above the master cylinder, which directly connects to the brake pedal. So you can see there are the two lines on the side of the reservoir. There's a min line and a max line. And then there's a sensor going to the reservoir. That's for the low fluid level sensor. That will keep the brake light on the dashboard if the fluid level is low. Remember that brake fluid is hygroscopic. You should not open the cap if the humidity level is high, such as recently after it has rained. So looking in, we can see the fluid is full. You should not touch the fluid. The fluid is hygroscopic. It's bad for your skin and will absorb any moisture or humidity in the air or off of your skin. You can also see that within that reservoir there was a mesh screen to stop you from dropping solid objects into the reservoir. Here are the owner's manual directions on how to check the brake fluid level. Finally, here's the capacity for engine oil and the capacity for CVT fluid. Brake fluid does not have a capacity listed, as the amount of fluid necessary is dependent on the thickness of your brake pads and brake shoes. That is the end of the video. The only fluids we have not yet checked would be the battery electrolyte level, which we can't check in my vehicle as I have an aftermarket sealed AGM battery, and the fuel level, which is fairly self-explanatory. Thank you for watching. Please leave any questions, comments, or concerns down below.